So I did a video on my YouTube channel helping the artists increase their art sales that I call Artist X. And everyone was asking me, who's Artist X? What is Artist X social? Where's Artist X from? I freaking love Artist X. And today we now have Michelle Bonds, who was Artist X inside that particular video. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself, Michelle.
Hey, hi, I'm Michelle Bonds. I'm a full-time artist and I make abstract and conceptual art. My primary medium is layered paper that I carve into to create complex topographies. And I'm really happy to be here talking with Jaroid today because, he was really very helpful and extremely supportive at a critical moment in my growth in the part of my practice that is business focused.
Yeah, it was an interesting last 2 months at the least. So, with that being said, give us a little background. So, when you like, let's say the last 3 months before we end up meeting, how would you describe like your art career and how are things going?
Well, I need to back up a little bit and just say that I had a corporate career for a couple of decades. And about 4 years ago, I left corporate and I was trying to figure out what to do. I was thinking of going back in. And then I had a bit of an existential experience, which inspired me to pursue art, and which is a complete pivot for me, like a complete 180 from what I was doing before, and pursue this as my profession. So I had several years of trying to figure out the art business on my own. And given that I had a business background, I was able to figure out a lot of things on my own. But the one place that I had no experience and no training in was really in sales and marketing. And what kind of led me to the moment where I reached out to you, Jaroid, was I spent about a year really focusing on sales and marketing myself and had figured out a lot of things, but I wasn't getting the traction that I needed. And I got to a point where it was just critical from a financial perspective for me to get this figured out. I had been looking at a number of different sales coaches on Instagram for art sales for many, many months. I would say probably at least 9 months. And I listened to a lot of what they had said, and I read their websites and looked at whatever content they provided. And given that I do have a business background, including an MBA, I wasn't really feeling like what the others out there had to offer really resonated with what I really needed, where my gaps lay. And I kept looking at your YouTube channel. Like I'd seen your Instagram ads and I'd signed up for one of those free hour-long trainings that you
Yeah.
offer on there. And I'd watched it and I thought, one day when I get to the point that I'm ready to really take this step, I think this might be the right place for me. I did kind of wait until the need was relatively urgent, I would say, for me to actually take the step. But the week that I finally decided that this was something that I needed, just coincidentally, was a week that you and Jonah were offering one of your in-person events. And so I signed up for that. And, the rest is history. I don't know if you want to tell that rest of that story yourself, but I'm happy to continue if you want.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So then after the event, you scheduled a call and then
Mhm.
we end up chatting directly.
Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about what happened on my end during that call. Um, so I was listening to what the two of you were saying, and I actually put a question in the Q&A that was not answered. So I was like, so how do you do social media? Just no answer. And I thought, okay, that must be a big part of what they teach. So that was why I really felt like, oh, it's not just sales, it's also the marketing component. So this is a really big chunk of what I need right now. And the answers might be here for me. So after the call, I decided, you know what? I don't know if I'm ready, but I don't know where else to go for this information in a way that makes sense. Because I've looked at sales trainings and I've looked at marketing trainings, but none of them really brought it into the art world. And that was where things were really tricky for me, like getting that right Rosetta Stone, you know?
Yeah.
So when I signed up for the call, it was actually an impulse. There was something in my gut that said, you need to do this and you need to do this right now. So I signed up for the call and then we got on the call and then everything changed.
Yeah. Probably the most interesting call I've had so far this year.
Oh,
Very
wow.
interesting. So on the call, are you okay if I share a little bit about the call?
Yeah, of course.
So on the call, me and Michelle talking, and I always ask like, what's motivating you to do this? And then as she started to share what was her motivation, Michelle started to get teary-eyed and
Yeah.
started to share a few tears with me on the call. It caused me to get emotional, so I started getting teary-eyed. And now this is the first time of us ever speaking one-to-one directly on this call, and I'm trying to see how I'm best able to help Michelle increase our sales. And now we both on this call looking at each other just like tears in our eyes.
True story. True story. I was very emotional because I had been pursuing an art career on my own with no experience in the industry, no connections during the COVID period. So it wasn't, a time where people were really out and about and it was easy to connect. And I also had had long COVID after I had COVID. So it had been a real personal journey for me to get to the point that I was on the call with you. And at that moment, I had reached the end of my funds, and my choice in that moment was I'm either going to take my rent money for this month and give it to this person to teach me this one skill that I really, really need in order to really move my career forward, or I've got to figure something else out. And I just knew that I couldn't go backwards. I had to go forwards. And I was scared. I was really, really scared to make this decision. I've had three jobs since I was like a teenager. I've constantly worked. I've always worked really, really hard. This has been the first time in my life I didn't have a paycheck coming in,
Yeah,
know? And I had run out of retirement money, and this was the moment. This was the moment. Am I going to do this, or am I going to, do the safe thing and get a job and, do what I know?
yeah. So let me ask you this. In that moment, at of us talking, what was that like pivoting point that made you decide, you know what? Even in such a tight position right now, I'm gonna do this.
Well, I asked you, what am I getting when I give you money? Like, what is your, so the business term for that is what's your value? Like, what's your value prop? What are you delivering for this? Um, because I'm pretty shrewd. I don't make emotional financial decisions for the most part.
Yeah,
And then you showed me the platform and you showed me the modules and you showed me what content was there. And again, my gut instinct said to me, this is exactly what you need. This is this is the thing that you are looking for. It was like I don't know, my entire system was saying yes, even though there was this part of my brain that was saying, pay your rent with that money. That is not what you should be doing right now. But everything else in me just knew that this was kind of in a way one of those rocky moments in my life where it was like, am I going to get up off the mat and keep swinging? Am I going to get up and turn to Creed and do this? And it was a moment within myself. because the information, it was clear that the value was there. It was clear that this was what I needed. And I should tell you this, I had even, after the call, taken the names of all the people that were case studies that you mentioned on the call and messaged them on Instagram and asked them about their experience working with you. So by the time I got to the call, I had already done due diligence. And so when we were talking, the reason that I was so emotional wasn't just, the money, it was also what this meant to me. And it was one of those moments of, did I have the courage to go for what I really want in
Mm.
life? Am I going to really take a stand and take a real risk? And, it's what they say about courage, right? Courage isn't not being scared. Courage is being afraid, doing it anyway. And so when we were having that conversation and I was teary-eyed and I'm telling you, like, this is where I'm at. And like, if it means that I need to give up all of the things that I have, all the material things that I have, this is who I am. I'm an artist and this is what I'm going to do with my life. And this is the next step. And I've got to figure out a way to make it happen. And I've never been more terrified in my life, but I'm
Mhm.
still going to do this.
So let's talk about it a bit. On the call, you're like, I'm in. We decided to begin working together.
Yeah.
Tell me this, just so everybody could be aware, because now I'm pretty sure everybody watching this is going to be thinking, so what happened? So at the end of the first 30 days,
Yeah.
where did you finish at with art sales?
Um, to give context, up until this point, in 4 years, I had maybe sold about 15 or $20,000 of art on my own in 4 years
In total. So we
total.
talking roughly about,
Not each year, about 5 grand a
yeah,
year.
so you talk like 4 or 5 grand a year.
A
Okay.
year. Yeah. So at the end of the first month, after doing, and I have to be honest, like I guzzled the information like it was air and I needed oxygen. So I went on the platform and I spent 10 days doing nothing but going through the platform, making notes, going over it and over and over and over it, and coming up with a plan. And I executed and I made 6,500 in sales the first month.
Yeah, which was crazy. I remember there's times we talk and I had to tell you, I'm like, Michelle, slow down. Don't get into that section just yet. Just stay in this section. Don't go over there just yet. Just focus here. And you like, Jaroid, I just want to learn it all. I feel like I need it. And this is how I do well. Just let me like digest as much as I can. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, if that works, that works. So let's talk about it. Now that we working together, first month was 6,500, which was crazy. But within that month, I always like to ask two crucial questions.
Okay.
One, what did you find to be the most challenging
Hmm. What did I find to be the most challenging?
in that month of working with me?
Hmm. Okay. It wasn't working with you wasn't difficult. Receiving the information from the platform wasn't difficult. There was a lot of information, there was a lot. And honestly, consuming the information and integrating the information was really challenging. I had to work through a lot of preconceived notions that I had about why this stuff would work. And I had a big block about selling, and feeling comfortable selling. That was a very uncomfortable place for me to like feel like a salesperson. It just didn't feel good. It felt yucky to me. And what I did to reconcile that within myself was, if you can't show up for yourself, show up for the work, was the way that I internally addressed that. So I had to create a mental shift around how I think about selling in that
Yeah.
way.
I love that. If you can't show up for yourself, show up for your work.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what it came down to.
And then what would you say was your favorite part? Like what and out of everything that I taught you over those first 30 days, what would you say was the most pivotal, the most changing part that you're just like, wow, that's it?
Oh, well, I have one other really challenging thing
Oh,
that
what
I
you
want
got?
to share. Because the other really difficult thing actually was learning how to process the rejections. That was really tough. That was really tough. But I kept going back to the training and playing that part over and over again of it's a numbers game, and the challenge for me in that was, I want to have a business where it's about personal connection through the artwork and reconciling the fact that it is a numbers game with that. And where I ended up was it's a numbers game to find my people, but once I find my people, then I can have that personal connection. And that made it okay.
Yeah.
My favorite part, honestly, Jaroid, my very favorite part was being able to have conversations with you, being able to have those chats with you and help me understand not just the training is like what you do, but having that conversation, those conversations with you about why and having an understanding of like the psychology of it. And I think the most pivotal piece of information that resonated with me then and still resonates with me now that you shared was when I asked you, do you remember this? When I asked you, why do people buy art? What is the psychology behind that? And your response, do you remember what your response was? It was people don't want to be sold, they want to purchase.
100%. 100%. And then I got to that to all artists. I say, here's the thing. When you're selling, I say you don't have to actually sell something that one already wants to own. And then it's just more of a connection. And art is like a gateway to connecting with people. People connect through art. And
Mhm.
then it's like once you understand that, then the entire idea for artists of thinking like, I need to be salesy and I don't want to be salesy. I say, no, no, no. You don't be salesy to sell art. You connect with people to sell art. And then when they resonate with that artwork, that's what leads to that purchase. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting month. So let's fast forward a little bit. People
Okay.
may be wondering, here are some questions that may come to people's mind. First, what's your price range? Like how much would you selling these pieces for?
So the pieces that sold, like my price points are, um, I would say New York informed. So I have very, very small originals that are 2 inches by 2 inches that I sell for $75. And then right now I have pieces that are 4 by 5 feet that are priced at 25,000. But the price points that I was selling in were I would say between, I guess like the range was $150 up to 5,000 per piece.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. That first 5,000 sale.
Yeah.
And by the way, for those that are watching, if you haven't seen me and Michelle, which in a video I call Artist X because I didn't want people to go search her up. But me and Michelle documented that entire first 30 days of walk on working together. So with that being said, explain how that first sale happened. Like when we had that conversation, and I told you like what to say, and then you called me afterwards. I feel like that was a changing moment right there.
Yeah, so I actually was, I don't know if you would, it's slightly, I was using LinkedIn, which is not covered
The
in the
trail.
program, but
So
you had connected me with an
whatever.
artist who was also making moves on LinkedIn.
I'm gonna take a pause. Huge shout out to Lori Royce.
Yes.
So I connected Michelle with Lori Royce. What's interesting, Lori joined the training maybe 2 months or so before Michelle.
Mhm.
And Lori ended up like selling like crazy right out the gate. So I was like, you know what? I think it'd be cool for you and Lori to connect. And
Mhm.
then them two connect and became close. So I'll let you finish.
Yeah, so actually, Lori and I to this day check in with each other every week and talk about how we're pivoting and what we're doing to kind of get our work out there. And, she's become a really important collaborator in my journey. But Lori had been working on LinkedIn, so joined up with her, and then I started reaching out to people from my corporate career on LinkedIn. And one of those people, I sent him a picture of a piece. And what you don't know, Jaroid, is that week I had been on LinkedIn for a couple of weeks at that point, and I decided, you know what? Instead of sending everybody different pieces, I'm just going to focus on one artwork. I'm going to sell this one piece to the right person, and I'm going to figure out who that is. So I reached out to someone. It was someone that I worked with, but we didn't know each other well. And I got into this dialogue. And then I reached out. I'm like, I've got somebody, Droid, help. What do I say at this moment? He and I went back and forth. He loved the piece that I showed him. We ended up meeting up, and actually Jonah, I had asked Jonah on a Q&A because I was going to go meet this person in person, and I asked Jonah, like, how do I do an in-person meeting? And Jonah's like, have them come to your studio. And I was like, I can't, like, I have to go meet this person in person somewhere. And so he gave me the great advice of finding a space that had good light. So I was able to do that, place near his office. I went and met with him. I followed the script that you gave me, the coaching that you gave me. Don't go on and on, get to the point, do a little rapport building in person. And interestingly, I didn't even need to do the close or the stacking. I did it, but I didn't even need to because he was already there with his credit card. As soon as he saw the piece, he just asked me a little bit about the background. Then he asked me how much it was. And I was like, oh, it's only $5,000. And he was like, oh, you take credit cards? And we like, I whipped out my Square and took the payment, and we put it back in the bag, and he took it home. And then when he got it home, his son saw it when he walked in the door, and his son immediately fell in love with the piece and negotiated with his father for the artwork. And so he never even got to have it in his own office because it went into his son's room. And he sent me a picture of it in his son's room. And I was so moved by that act of fatherly love,
Yeah.
that I did a post about it on social. I asked them if I could share the picture on the wall, and it was really heartwarming. And so it was a great lesson in that you can do well and kind of do good at the same time. You can really bring meaning to people's lives, and you can also make a living at what you do as an artist.
I think that's like the key thing with being an artist. Like I tell people, being an artist is not just selling art, but it's connecting with people. And I genuinely believe art changed people's lives.
Mm.
So let's fast forward now. Now, at this point, you mentioned how you was like on the brink of you decided between like, do you pay your rent or do you join a program? You decided to join a training. I have made 6,500, if I'm not mistaken, by the end of the month. And then now we're going into month two, which is this current month we in, where you're at as far as art sales.
Yeah, so I've stopped and restarted on LinkedIn a few times because I kept modifying my script. So I just want to say to everyone, modifying your script is something that never ends, but you get into a flow. And I should preface my number for the month with I did spend the month of May. I did two art fairs and I did one open studio event in conjunction with an area art festival that happened in the month of May. And if I cannot emphasize this enough to everyone, I will shout this on the rooftops if I have to. Getting in front of people will streamline how you talk about your work in the way that nothing else will. My way of talking about my work, I am so in flow. Everything that I learned from being in front of someone and getting that like one-on-one interaction has changed completely how I talk about my work. And I'm taking everything that I learned, and that's the next 4 to 6 months of social media content for me, is that way of talking about my work. So I highly recommend that. But so far this month, I have hit 5,000 this month. And I have two studio visits coming, two people that are serious collectors coming in for studio visits. I've got 125 new email addresses that are all good for my newsletter. So the next level up for me is really learning how to be very targeted with my email marketing. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be bringing that up on the calls, Jaroid.
So let's talk about it. So right now, it's crazy when you really think about it. 1 month ago,
Yeah.
well, technically 2 months coming up on now, we was on the call sharing tears, and you was making a decision between do I pay my rent or do I do a training? And now 2 months later, so a total of what is that? $11,500 for.
Yeah. Yeah. But the best part isn't the money. The best part, the best two best parts are like the connections that I've been able to make with people. And here's the most important part. My confidence in my ability to talk about my work in a way that creates value for others and then have an exchange around that where I receive money and they receive the artwork.
Yeah.
My ability to do that, I no longer have anxiety or fear or discomfort, or all of that is gone. And that is really the most critical part from my perspective, because I think in my experience, many artists that I've met have concerns and fears and discomfort around selling their work. They want someone else to do it because it
100%.
feels, yeah, it doesn't feel good. But it does, it can feel good. And I found my way to it feeling right for me. And the scripts and having some grounding in actions and understanding the psychology around it and building your own philosophy into it is what I think is so important about what you and ArtistRise, the platform provide, is that like, here are the steps. Here are the reasons why these are the steps. This is the psychology behind that. Now, take that after you have mastery of the basics and go learn how to apply it in your own way. Like, I think that is a really critical thing that I've found that you keep emphasizing. This is
Yeah.
what I recommend, but you've got to do it in your voice, is the way you usually say it.
Yeah. I always say you have to be genuine. Like if you want people to buy your work, it's about genuine connections and authentic conversations. Because I get asked sometimes, artists ask like, Troy, what exactly should I say? How should I say this that's gonna make them buy? And I'm like, first, you can't make somebody buy anything. They have to resonate with the piece. And that happens from you being yourself and just following a structure that I teach of like the conversations that just come out very authentic. And that's what leads to those sales. Kind of like what happened with you and the first guy who purchased a piece, then went home with it, and then his son is like, I need it, right?
Yeah.
So for people watching right now, all the artists that are like, wow, this is amazing, congrats on your success, but how do I get there? What advice, if you had to give one piece of advice to an artist who was in your shoes or currently in your shoes, what would you tell them?
Well, I would say two things. The first thing is find the right teacher for you. You were the right teacher for me, Droid. That's really important. That's extremely important. Otherwise, you won't listen.
Yeah.
You need to find someone who you believe is credible. Obviously, I'm a big Jaroid fan. I'm a big ArtistRise fan. Clearly that worked for me. I know that this isn't going to be right for everyone. But to me, like I've got a very powerful need to get my money's worth. And I very strongly feel that I've gotten many, many times my money's worth from this platform. The second thing that I would say that is really critical is find an accountability partner that will push you. Because we mentioned Lori. I have two other people from the platform that
Cool.
I talk to almost every week. Erica.
Oh, Erica Mo. Erica's phenomenal.
Yeah, Erica and I just recently started meeting and talking because I had wanted to have like a pitch partner, and we've kind of become more accountability partners and someone that I can talk to about how I'm pivoting my language and how I'm approaching that. So Erica's one. And then Rob uh,
Hmm.
has been an amazing friend and partner in this journey with me. And he is my social media. I call him my social media buddy because, he's a photographer. And so it's about like making reels and figuring out lighting and figuring out, are we telling the right story and how do we use the editing software and what's this AI thing over here? Like he's my friend that I can have all of those conversations with. So for me, I like to have multiple people because I have multiple things I'm focusing on usually. But having an accountability partner or partners keeps me on task and it keeps me moving the ball down the field and also helps me prevent getting stuck in loops for too long. I think that's another big benefit to it.
I think is extremely important. I just think when you surround yourself with other people along that journey with you, it just makes it easier. It makes it more, I guess you could say, comfortable. Because when you just feel like you're not doing it by yourself,
Mhm.
even when you take losses, you have somebody also there to like help take the load off. I just think it just helps. I'm always big on like accountability partners. Here's the tough question.
Yes.
Let's say you would keep all the knowledge you have right now that you learned over these last 2 months.
Mhm.
But we went back in time and started working together all over again. What advice would you give to yourself that you think will help you perform better or at least achieve those results faster?
Ah, it would be honestly, I would tell myself it's okay to be anxious. You'll get used to it. You'll get used to it. Because my biggest challenges are never the acquisition of and the integration of knowledge. It's always the emotional journey.
Yeah,
I tell myself you're going to be all right. You can trust the process.
I agree. And one thing that's interesting is that you actually took a very unique route because like what I teach, you took everything that I teach and then started really implementing it in your own way. Because for those watching,
Mhm.
there is no section inside my training about selling at fairs or in person or selling at LinkedIn. And it's like what happened with Michelle, she like took the process I teach and then like really started carving it to best fit her, which I think is super, super cool. So now, next question.
Yes.
If now that you work with me for 2 months,
Mhm.
let's say you're my mentor, what
Ah.
advice would you give Jeroy Henry?
Do you want me to give advice to the actual Jaroid Henry, or do you want me to give advice to Jaroid Henry, this artist that's just joined the platform? Can you
Jeroy.
contextualize for
The
me?
actual Jeroy Henry. The Jeroy Henry, you know.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so Jaroid, my advice to you would be to expand the training to include some longer term relationship building and maintenance that isn't necessarily focused on sales. One of the things that I learned from doing the fairs is that sometimes you're going to have people that are going to be fans and they're never going to buy from you. Or they might not buy for 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years, but you still want to have that relationship with them because they might bring somebody else in. I had that happen where I knew somebody and I didn't think that they were going to buy because they were another artist. They came to my booth. They ended up buying a small piece at the very end. And then they brought a collector over who is actually has my information and has been looking at my work and is thinking about buying a piece. So thinking a little bit more and instead of, because I think a lot of the focus of the training, and rightfully so, is on just making the sale and making the close. I think that's a very important focus because you need to learn that skill as an artist. We do not have that. Most of
Yeah.
us, I'm going to say not all of us, some of us do, but like that intuition to go for, the saying, let's do this is a very important skill that needs to be developed. But there's also this other place where there's a ton of relationship and other potential value there, and really expanding to allow for that. It's a very abundance mindset type way of thinking about it. Like there's value everywhere,
Yeah.
not just the sale that I can make right now. So that would be what my thoughts are.
No, that's good. What's funny is we actually just been thinking about that. And I just did like a I don't know if you was on it. You probably was. But I did a live Q&A the Monday before last, just kind of talk about like long-term success and long-term growth. Because I noticed that I'm like inside the trend, I'm like, holy crap. I have a lot of artists who are selling and they're crushing and they're coming into the training and they're selling so quickly within the first week, especially from like the 7 day success challenge. So, but I'm like, I don't want them to get caught up on selling. I want them to also start building a long-term career around this success. And I think that's so spot on. And
Yeah.
then what you got?
No, I was just saying, yeah, I think that as I'm getting further into the experience, I'm seeing that it's actually selling is actually becoming very, very easy
Hmm.
because I've learned how to talk about my work and I've learned how to put it out on social media. And one thing that I've started to notice, it takes time for this to happen. It takes like for me, I've been at social for about 9 months and I haven't even been doing it all that well. And I've been only in this training for 2 months, 2.5 months. So, doing it from the way that you teach is also new. But I have noticed that the cumulative effects of people seeing me on LinkedIn and seeing me on Instagram. And now I've got a TikTok account and getting my newsletter and, seeing me in person. Those multiple points, you mentioned it in the training, but it's kind of gets, I think from my perspective, it gets a little bit buried. The talking about like those different touch points and the accumulation in people's minds of credibility. I've gotten so many emails from people recently, like at least 3 emails where people are like, Michele, I'm so proud of you for having made this pivot. I now tell people I know a successful artist. You've been doing this for years, and I feel like I know somebody who's legitimate, in that space. And it's just amazing for me. And even though they don't collect, there's still this feeling of being on your journey. And I had underestimated or hadn't even realized that people are actually watching. It's what you say, like, act as if a million people are watching you. And it's really more from the perspective of, so get off your rear end and go do something. But it's also people are inspired by what you do as an artist. They are interested in the story. I've been now asked by two other people to be interviewed on their podcasts. I just did that the last month. And people have heard those podcasts and have said, I'm so inspired by her journey. This is amazing. I really needed to hear that. And I just would like to encourage other artists to think about the fact that you do have a story to tell and that it is interesting. So I'm actually now going to be reaching out to other career changer podcasts to talk about the journey that I've been on that I'm sharing with you right now and, see if I can help other people with that. And the manifestation of all of that is my artwork. It's a symbol of that transition. So everything kind of ties together. It took me a while to really see that, but yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to share that thought with you.
No, no, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's something a lot of artists need to hear. And it just honestly just seeing the transformation from when we first spoke 2 months ago to today, just the energy and I can see the joy in your face and just the fulfillment is great to see. It was a fun journey, and I always like to say we just getting started. If you haven't watched the I'm gonna call it the like live walkthrough with Michelle Bonds. I'm gonna put a link below because it's like so good. So everything Michelle just talked about, we actually documented that, and you could hear all the emotions, the changes, the growth, tears being shared, successes, talking about wins. Is I think it's a really good like just video to see in time. So I think it was really great.
Well, if I can do it, you can do it. That's what I have to say to other artists. If I can do it, you can do it. You can stand in your value and you can communicate that to people and you can move people and make a difference in their life with your work. That's a
Yeah,
very real thing.
100%. 100%. With that being said, we're gonna wrap this interview up. It was absolutely amazing. Not just having you in on this interview, but also working together for the last 2 months and everything that we went through to get to this point. So it was good.
Jaroid, I just want to thank you for everything that you have given to me and the support you've provided. I have a lot of respect for you and for what you've created. I think that you can help a lot of people with what you do, and I see you do it every day. I see you show up and I see you give what you have to give. And I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, you're definitely welcome.